precious metals community is abuzz this week about the op-ed piece Larry Summers wrote for the Washington Post, in which he calls not only for stopping the issuance of $100 bills, but an agreement among Western nations to not issue cash of greater denominations than $50. Everyone is seeing this as a salvo in the war on cash, and rightly so. The banking system clearly wants to eliminate cash, or at least reduce the amount in circulation. Summers states as the foundation of his argument that the large bills enable terrorism and drug running, but I think this is the reason he gives to the public simply because the real reason for eliminating cash will be far less acceptable to the public. I'd like to give you my perspective in terms of why this war on cash is beginning and what it could portend for the future. First, let's read a couple of paragraphs from his essay. One paragraph reads, "What should happen next?" I'd guess the idea of removing existing notes is a step too far, but a moratorium on printing new high-denomination notes would make the world a better place. In terms of unilateral steps, the most important actor by far is the European Union. The €500 note is almost 6 times as valuable as the $100 note. Some actors in Europe, notably the European Commission, have shown sympathy for the idea, and European Central Bank Chief Mario Draghi has shown interest as well. If Europe moved, pressure could likely be brought on others, notably Switzerland. Another paragraph reads, "Even better than unilateral measures in Europe would be a global agreement to stop issuing notes worth more than, say, $50 or $100. Such an agreement would be as significant as anything else the G7 or G20 has done in years. China, which is hosting the next G20 in September, has made attacking corruption a central part of its economic and political strategy. More generally, at a time when such a demonstration is very much needed, a global agreement to stop issuing high-denomination notes would also show that the global financial groupings can stand up against big money and for the interests of ordinary citizens." So we can clearly see that Summers, who wrote this article shortly after the 2016 World Economic Forum in Davos, is expressing an interest in international cooperation to eliminate large denomination cash notes. But is the real reason the one he gave, or is it something else? Let's explore the issue by taking a look specifically at the $100 bill. When we look at a snapshot of a web page from the Federal Reserve website, we can see lifespans of various currencies. Lifespans are important because they give us a pretty good indication of how frequently various notes change hands. It also gives us a good indication of how frequently the notes find their way back into the banking system. The banking system, when notes are returned, will inspect them for quality and wear. If they are deemed unacceptable for circulation, they are replaced. According to the statistics shown in this table, the $100 bill is estimated to last 15 years, which is about 2.5 to 3 times longer than the 1s, 5s, and 10s. So we'd expect from this that 100s circulate in the economy and return to the banking system with a frequency that's about 30 to 40% slower than the smaller bills. And this somewhat makes intuitive sense. How often do you personally use $100 bills? The smaller bills are more common for most of us. Now, pay attention to the footnotes in this table. It mentions that the replacement lifespan of the $100 bill is an estimated figure because they redesigned the $100 bill in 2013. So the Federal Reserve indicates it does not have sufficient data to determine an exact replacement frequency. I should probably send them a letter and tell them about the Internet Wayback Machine because I was able to find some data from their website published on November 28th of the year 2011. Let's take a look and see what it says. That's better. Now we have replacement frequencies for the various denominations without the need to estimate. According to this data, the replacement frequency of $100 bills is 21.6 years, not the 15 estimated recently by the Federal Reserve. So we can see that according to this data, the $100 bill lasts 4.5 to 6 times longer than the smaller denomination notes. In other words, they circulate from person to person, and to and from the banking system with a frequency that's only about 15 to 20% that of the smaller bills. The 100s don't really circulate all that quickly. As I'll show you in a moment, the 100s represent about 80% of the total value of cash in circulation. So, with such a large amount in circulation and such a small circulation frequency, one must conclude that the 100s are not used so much as a medium of exchange as they are a perceived store of value. And I'm using the word perceived here deliberately. The $100 bills are used by people who have faith in the notes themselves but don't trust them to the custody of the banking system. At this time, it's appropriate to draw a parallel to the old banking system of the early 20th century, just before the run on the banks in the early 30s. Back then, the monetary system had demand deposits, just like there are now, though a key difference was that the demand deposits were redeemable for gold and silver coin. The gold and silver coin were the legal tender of that age. The gold and silver coin were the obligations of the banks. The gold and silver coin in circulation were outside of the banking system's control. The gold coins did not circulate nearly as quickly as the silver coins did, as is evidenced by the fact that pre-1933 gold coins that still exist today tend to have far less wear than their silver counterparts. The gold coins were not carried around as much and did not change hands as frequently. In fact, many people who didn't trust their gold to the banking system hid them away. So one can see that there is a vague parallel between the $100 bill of today and the gold coin of yesteryear. The $100 bill today is legal tender. As cash, it is the obligation of the banking system represented by their demand deposits. It does not circulate quickly, and it represents a large percentage of total cash outside of the banking system. And we know what happened in the early 30s. When more and more people lost confidence in the banking system, there was a run, and people started to withdraw their gold. It got to the point where the banks were in danger of not being able to honor their obligations, and so a banking holiday was declared, and an attempt was made to deter people from hoarding gold by calling it in and making it illegal for Americans to hold it. Today our situation is quite different. The cash outstanding today is the Achilles heel of the banking system. When confidence is lost in the banking system, there will be a run on Federal Reserve notes. More on this later. Here is another snapshot from the Federal Reserve's website. We can see here the percentage of each denomination note in circulation. In the year 2015, the $100 bills represented $1.08 trillion, which is about 80% of the $1.38 trillion worth of notes in circulation. So even though they don't really circulate like the other notes, there sure are a lot of them out there relative to the other notes. We can see, therefore, how they serve a different purpose in the minds of the public than the other notes do. And this is probably a point of consternation for the bankers, because the currency was not meant to be a store of value. It was intended to be a medium of exchange. When the obligations of the banks are seen as a store of value and pulled from the banking system, it creates the potential for a run on the banking system, like what occurred in the 1930s. This, of course, is more of a mathematical problem now than it is a problem of scarcity of the underlying obligation, mainly because the banking system can print the notes, whereas it could not conjure up gold on a printing press. Nevertheless, it is a mathematical problem the banking system does not want to deal with. For in doing so, they have to make an admission of failure. Let's dig a little bit deeper. Here is a chart showing the total amount of M1 money supply from about 1960 onward. A comment is warranted at this point about just what the M1 money supply represents. It is defined as currency in circulation, plus demand deposits, plus traveler's checks. In theory, it represents the total amount of money that can be used immediately for purchases. I say in theory because although the owners of deposit accounts should be free to withdraw their cash any time they choose to do so, the Federal Reserve imposes reserve requirements on the banks. Currently, the reserve requirement for large banking institutions is 10%. Though the banking system can play games like using sweep accounts, there are limits to this practice. If enough depositors withdrew cash, It would first cause the Federal Reserve to have to reduce the reserve requirements, but eventually the whole banking system would go insolvent, which again is just a mathematical problem, but a very real problem psychologically for depositors. Now, notice that in late 2007, before what people are calling the Great Recession, M1 was $1.38 trillion. During the economic emergency, M1 was expanded to $3.08 trillion. The graph at the top shows the dramatic increase in the rate of M1 money supply growth. Now, also notice that since 2007, currency in circulation increased from $0.79 trillion to $1.38 trillion. The problem, though, is that a little over $500 billion of this increase was $100 bills, which represents money that is pulled out of the banking system and does not readily come back. What has to have bankers concerned is that the rate at which $100 bills are being produced for consumers who are withdrawing their money is increasing. From 2005 to 2010, the supply of $100 bills grew by 29%. By contrast, from 2010 to 2015, the supply of $100 bills grew by 54%, almost a doubling in the rate of $100 bill production. You can verify these figures by going back and looking at the previous slide. All in all, the immediate liabilities of the banking system grew by $1.11 trillion, and at the same time, the amount of hoarded cash, namely the $100 bills, grew by $0.51 trillion. I imagine that going forward, if the U.S. adopts negative interest rates, and those negative rates are passed along to depositors, we may see an acceleration in cash withdrawals. Do you see a problem here? I certainly do. And I'm sure that the heads of the banking system see a problem, and I'm sure that Larry Summers does too. Terrorism and drugs are the reason for going to a cashless society? Hardly. It is simply a blocking of the exit doors. But let's talk a little bit more about the need for a store of wealth that can be held outside of the banking system. While I think the trust placed in the $100 bill is ill-advised, I certainly understand the desire of those who seek to store at least a portion of their wealth outside of the banking system. The problem this creates for the banking system is that when the store of wealth is the same instrument that the banking system loans out, it creates the possibility of bank runs and bank failures. This happened in the 1930s with gold, and I believe it is a very real risk today with Federal Reserve notes. In form, it is a very different risk, but mathematically, it is very much the same. There will always be people who will not trust the financial system with all of their wealth, and there must be a means to satisfy this desire. It's interesting that there was a large movement on the part of major world governments to introduce gold bullion coins, similar to the South African Krugerrand, between the years 1979 and 1989. I often wonder about the great men who were behind the legislation that introduced these coins, and what their ultimate intentions were. Maybe that is a good subject for another video. In any event, what was created was a product with a certified weight and fineness that people could trust. What's more, these items could be hoarded in unlimited quantities without it creating any stress whatsoever on the banking system. Think of it this way. You write a check to pay for an ounce of gold from your local coin shop. The funds go from your bank account into the account of the coin shop without ever leaving the banking system. Thus, a means exists for people to hold as much wealth as they choose outside of the banking system without it ever creating a bank run. It is certainly more desirable for the bankers that people do this than withdraw $100 bills. I believe that if the banking system goes cashless, which looks to be more and more likely, it is going to significantly increase the demand for an alternative to cash for wealth held outside of the banking system. And it's in the bank's best interests to encourage this. This demand is going to have to be met, and it's likely going to be these coins that will meet the need. I imagine gentlemen such as Larry Summers understand this and have positioned themselves accordingly. But it does beg the question, who were all of the architects behind all of these coin programs, and what did they have in mind when they introduced the legislation? More on that later.